Hello, welcome to the podcast AnonX. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that has, captivated, intrigued, and definitely unsettled people for decades, the concept of the New World Order, or NWO. You've given us a really fascinating stack of sources here. We've got academic analyses, historical accounts, lots of different viewpoints on this whole idea. So our mission today is to unpack these materials. We want to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, explore the different angles of the NWO, from its history and who's supposedly pulling the strings, how they might be implementing it, and its impact on, society and culture. We'll navigate through some pretty complex stuff, try to balance summaries with memorable details so you can get a clear understanding without getting totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that stirs things up. It's controversial, no doubt. And when people talk about the New World Order, they're often thinking about a desire for a one-world government. They're asking, are there really groups trying to make us give up our freedoms, our national sovereignty, under a single global ruler? Or is it all just confusion, a hoax?
Okay, definitely a lot to unpack. So let's start right there, this idea of the New World Order. What exactly is it, and how did this concept kind of grow and change over time?
Well, at its core, the NWO is a term you hear a lot in conspiracy theories. It basically hypothesizes about a secretly emerging totalitarian world government. The main idea, the common theme, is this belief in a hidden power elite. They have a globalist agenda, supposedly, and they're conspiring to rule the world. How? Through an authoritarian one-world government that would replace, individual nations. And this elite group is also said to use, massive propaganda to sell the NWO's establishment as the grand finale of history.
It's interesting, though, how the actual phrase New World Order isn't inherently secret or conspiratorial, right? I mean, you mentioned presidents. George Bush Sr. used it famously back in '91, apparently over 200 times during his presidency. But he was talking about something different, a new period in history, new ways for countries to work together after big conflicts like World War I and II. That led to things like the UN, NATO.
Right, that's a really key point. The original meaning was more about global cooperation, a kind of hopeful vision. But the shift in how people saw that phrase, how it got woven into conspiracy thinking, is fascinating. Before the early 1990s, NWO conspiracy stuff was mostly found in certain groups that were really anti-government, right-wing, and some fundamentalist Christians worried about the Antichrist and end times. But after communism fell around the early 90s, the target sort of shifted. It wasn't crypto-communists anymore. Suddenly, the enemy was globalists. This idea of an untouchable oligarchy, international bankers, corrupt politicians, big corporations, or even the UN itself plotting this takeover. And this really grew out of a rising backlash against corporate internationalism.
Okay, so that explains the concept and the shift. Now, who do people actually claim are the ones behind it all? Let's dig into the key players and organizations mentioned in these NWO theories, starting with some of the historical connections people make.
Sure. When you trace these theories back, Freemasonry comes up a lot. It's one of the oldest secular fraternal groups. Conspiracy theories often claim that Freemasons have this secret political goal: bring about the NWO. Some even say founding fathers like Washington and Franklin wove Masonic symbols, sacred geometry, into American society. They point to the Great Seal, the dollar bill, even the layout of Washington, D.C.
The Novus Ordo Seclorum thing on the seal.
Exactly, which means New Order of the Ages. But conspiracy theorists often mistranslate it as New World Order to fit the narrative. Of course, Freemasons themselves push back hard on this. They say, look, we're about personal growth, charity, moral development, no secret political plan, no agreement on what the best government even is.
Okay, so Freemasons are one thread. But then you get into the really juicy stuff people talk about. The Illuminati. How do they fit in?
The Illuminati. Well, historically, they were a real group, an Enlightenment-era secret society founded in Bavaria, 1776, by Adam Weishaupt. They were all about free thought, reason, pushing back against state and religious control. But they were suppressed pretty quickly by 1785. And there's really no solid historical proof they survived after that.
But the theories say otherwise.
Oh, yeah. Later on, especially in the late 18th century, you had these reactionary writers who started speculating. They claimed the Illuminati did survive secretly, and that they were the masterminds behind the French Revolution, trying to spark this global revolutionary wave. Fast forward to the 20th century, these ideas got picked up again, sometimes twisted to claim the Illuminati served Jewish elites. And more recently, some right-wing populists started saying that college fraternities, think tanks like the Council on Foreign Relations, that these are just Illuminati fronts today.
Wow, quite a leap from an 18th century Bavarian group. And this brings up something really troubling. You mentioned the connection to Jewish elites. How does that infamous document, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, play into this?
Right, the protocols. It's crucial to understand this is a known anti-Semitic fabrication, a canard. It first appeared in Russia around 1903. It pretends to be the minutes from secret meetings of Jewish leaders, supposedly working with Freemasons, detailing a plan for world domination. But it's been proven definitively to be a forgery, a piece of plagiarism cooked up by the Russian secret police to stir up anti-Semitism.
Despite being debunked for over a century.
Exactly. Despite being completely debunked, it still holds influence in some NWO circles today. It fuels anti-Semitic and anti-Masonic hysteria, this false idea of Jewish control over banks, media, governments. It's deeply harmful.
So we have these historical threads, often tangled with misinformation. How do modern groups and powerful individuals get pulled into the NWO narrative today?
Well, moving closer to the present, you hear about the Round Table movement. This started, influenced by Cecil Rhodes, aiming for closer ties between Britain and its colonies, sort of an imperial federation. Figures like Alfred Milner, Lionel George Curtis were involved, and this eventually led to organizations like the Royal Institute of International Affairs in the UK, and later, groups like the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, and the Trilateral Commission in the U.S.
And conspiracy theorists see these as, what, fronts?
Pretty much. They view them as front organizations for the Anglo-American establishment or an international banking cabal, all supposedly plotting a global financial system for the NWO. Then you have specific families and individuals who get targeted. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are probably the most common names you hear. The claim is they control huge parts of the financial world, the media.
And that David Rockefeller quote.
Right, from his own memoirs. He said something like, regarding being an internationalist conspiring for a more integrated global structure, if that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it. Whether he meant it seriously, jokingly, or a bit of both, theorists grab onto that as absolute proof.
And newer figures, too.
Oh, yes. More recently, Bill Gates, George Soros, they get accused of being part of this shadowy group, too. Often their philanthropy, like work in global health or funding open society projects, gets twisted into being about control. And it doesn't stop there. People point to other groups as shadow governments. The Bilderberg Group, with its secret annual meetings, the Bohemian Club, the Club of Rome, the Rhodes Trust, Skull and Bones at Yale. Theorists see all these as places where the elite conspire, planning this totalitarian NWO, maybe run by the UN and a world central bank.
It's a really wide net they cast. Okay, so we've talked about who is allegedly involved. Now, how do proponents think this global control is actually being implemented? Is it like a sudden switch or more gradual?
It's often seen as a mix, but gradualism is a big theme. Many theorists believe the NWO isn't happening overnight. They point to the creation of international bodies as, like, stepping stones. The U.S. Federal Reserve back in 1913, the League of Nations, then the IMF, the UN, the World Bank, the WHO, the EU, the WTO, the African Union.
So these organizations, meant for cooperation, are seen as steps towards centralization.
Exactly. They're viewed not as collaborative efforts, but as slow steps towards giving up national power to a single world authority. There's also fear around things like new international currencies, like the IMF's special drawing rights, or ideas floated about a North American Union with an Amero currency seen as the next move towards a global system.
Okay, that's the slow burn theory. What about the more dramatic, sudden takeover scenario?
Yeah, that's the other side. Especially among American right-wing militia groups and theorists, there's speculation about a sudden coup d'etat. They imagine this secret team, maybe using unmarked black helicopters, swooping in to establish a totalitarian regime. Usually the UN is seen as the controlling force, with foreign peacekeepers enforcing it.
And this would involve
things like suspending the Constitution, imposing martial law, rounding up dissenters and putting them in supposed FEMA concentration camps. Fear of gun control is huge here, too. The idea is they need to disarm the population first.
And 9/11 gets pulled into this as well.
Yes, for many, 9/11 is seen as a potential false flag operation. The theory goes that U.S. intelligence orchestrated it or allowed it to happen as part of a strategy of tension to justify more government control, political repression, preemptive wars, all steps paving the way for the NWO.
So beyond coups and gradual institutional creep, what other tools are allegedly used? Thinking about information, personal freedom, even our health.
Mass surveillance is definitely seen as a key tool. Theorists point to things we almost take for granted now: social security numbers, barcodes on products, and increasingly things like RFID microchips. They see these as ways to track and control everyone.
And the number of the beast connection.
No, right. For some Christian conspiracy theorists, these technologies look worryingly like the prophecy in the Book of Revelation, a sign of ultimate control. And when government programs like DARPA's Information Awareness Office pop up, especially with logos like an all-seeing eye, it just fuels those fears intensely. Then there's the idea of manipulating how people think. Social critics and NWO theorists accuse governments, corporations, the media of creating a culture of fear or manufacturing consent.
To make people more controllable.
That's the idea. And the extreme end of this is literal mind control. People talk about alleged brainwashing programs like MKUltra or Project Monarch, or using things like supposedly water fluoridation or subliminal messages in advertising. And in the anti-Semitic versions of the theory, mainstream media is often painted as a Jewish propaganda arm, specifically designed to brainwash society for the takeover.
That's some deep-level manipulation being alleged. What about health crises? Vaccines, viruses, population control, were these seen as real events or part of the conspiracy?
For proponents of these theories, they are absolutely seen as part of the plan. The idea is the NWO wants to control population size, maybe limit growth through family planning, or more sinisterly, reduce populations through engineered conflicts, manufactured viruses, or tainted vaccines.
So things like the COVID-19 pandemic fit right into this narrative for them.
Exactly. COVID, the lockdowns, mask mandates, they're often cited as prime examples of a manufactured crisis used to exert unprecedented control. Mass shootings sometimes get lumped in, too, as events used to push agendas. Even environmental disasters are sometimes blamed on secret NWO projects, like using HARP technology to control weather, or chemtrails. And the UN's Agenda 21, which is actually a non-binding plan for sustainable development.
That's interpreted differently.
Completely. It's seen by some as this master plan to force people into cities, depopulate rural areas, and control all land and resources, trampling property rights.
And we also have to touch on the occult element that seems to weave through a lot of this.
Yes, that's another significant thread, especially for some Christian right theorists. They believe in this ancient occult conspiracy, perpetuated, they say, by groups like Gnostics, Knights Templar, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, the Illuminati. The goal: to undermine Judeo-Christian society and replace it with a New Age, one-world religion as part of the NWO.
And they see evidence of this.
In symbols like the Eye of Providence again. In rituals like Masonic ceremonies. In monuments and buildings. They point to landmarks on the National Mall, the Manitoba Legislative Building, even Denver International Airport's murals and layout. A classic example was the Georgia Guidestones, before they were damaged and removed. Some theorists called them the NWO's anti-Christian Ten Commandments.
It's really striking how persistent this NWO theory is, how it touches on so many fears. Why do you think so many people still find it believable or compelling?
Well, it's spread into the mainstream, especially recently. It owes a lot to social media. Recommendation algorithms can kind of act as, well, soft radicalization points, guiding people towards more extreme ideas. Michael Barkun, who studies this stuff, pointed out 3 core beliefs conspiracists often hold. 1, nothing happens by accident. 2, nothing is as it seems. And 3, everything is connected.
And those ideas are powerful.
Incredibly powerful. They seem to offer simple explanations for a really complex, often confusing world. If nothing happens by accident, it imposes a kind of order, even if it's a scary one. It also taps into a genuine disillusionment many people feel with politics, with established institutions. They're looking for answers, and these big, simple narratives can seem appealing.
And it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It connects with other movements, other online phenomena.
Definitely. The NWO theory often overlaps with other big conspiracy theories, like QAnon. You see it intersecting with claims from supposed online whistleblowers. It's become a central part of anti-globalist and anti-state thinking, especially on the right wing and within militia circles. And as we touched on, it's vital to acknowledge its deep roots in anti-Semitism, going back to the protocols.
That connection keeps coming up.
It does. Whether people realize it or not, NWO narratives often echo or directly use anti-Semitic tropes, the idea of Jewish elites, especially banking families like the Rothschilds, controlling world events, finance, media. Some groups are explicit, even calling it the Jew World Order, or JWO, referencing the protocols as proof. This kind of rhetoric is dangerous, it dehumanizes, and can radicalize people.
Which leads to a really serious question. what are the real-world consequences? Does belief in the NWO ever translate into actual violence?
Sadly, yes. Law enforcement agencies like the FBI have noted that political conspiracy theories, NWO included, can motivate extremists to commit crimes, including violence. There have been cases, arrests of people stockpiling weapons to attack places like the Heart facility, believing it controls weather for NWO sacrifices, or plots to bomb monuments seen as satanic NWO symbols. Academics warn that widespread belief, this kind of mass hysteria, could have really damaging effects. Lone wolf attacks, certainly, but also potentially helping authoritarian leaders rise to power by exploiting these fears, pushing xenophobia, and scapegoating.
It's a heavy side to it. But the NWO idea has also filtered into popular culture in less overtly dangerous ways, right? Movies, games, music.
Absolutely. It pops up everywhere in entertainment, often playing with those themes of hidden power and global plots. You have things like the Illuminati trilogy, which kind of satirized the whole Illuminati super conspiracy idea back in the 70s. In books, the Left Behind series featured the global community, a classic NWO run by the Antichrist. In TV and movies, you see versions like The Cooperative in American Horror Story, The Global Authority in Colony, The Partnership in The Strain, The Dryness Group in Mr. Robot. Lots of shadowy organizations pulling strings.
So it's definitely captured the imagination. Okay, I've gone deep into the theory itself. But what about the critics? What do skeptics say about all this? Is the New World Order a potential reality, or is it just a theory?
Well, critics have quite a bit to say. They often accuse proponents of logical fallacies. There's the furtive fallacy, assuming any significant hidden fact must be sinister. There's conspiracism itself, explaining history mainly through secret plots rather than, complex social forces, economics, incompetence, or just chance. And fusion paranoia, just grabbing fears from all over the place and weaving them into one giant conspiracy.
And what about the idea of the elite actually wanting this?
Sociologists like G. William Domhoff argue that the theory assumes the wealthy elite have these grand secret plans to completely change government. He suggests that doesn't really match how power structures usually work, or the elite's typical focus on, maintaining their advantages within the current system, mostly driven by profit. Critics also point out that predictions of a one-world government have been made for decades, and they haven't come true. If anything, they might say, nationalism seems to be on the rise globally, not fading away. There's also criticism from within Christianity itself. Some Christian voices argue NWO rhetoric actually twists their faith. They say it has no real basis in the Bible, that it's anti-biblical. They warn against a spirit of fear that distorts scripture and history, turning faith into panic. They actually call on fellow Christians to repent for getting caught up in conspiracism, urging careful reading of the Bible instead of using it to justify prejudice or fear.
That's an interesting internal critique. And you also mentioned a specific spiritual perspective from some sources, framing the NWO differently again.
Yes, from figures like Lonnie Johnson and Metropolitan Demetrius. Their view, drawing on certain biblical interpretations, sees the push for a one-world government not just as human plotting, but as something orchestrated by Satan. They view it as part of a long-term spiritual battle, going back to Eden, the Tower of Babel, an attempt to create a counterfeit kingdom to oppose God's eventual kingdom. In this view, Satan uses human systems and desires to turn people against God, leading to a final conflict. They believe this counterfeit kingdom might succeed, but only for a short time.
So the advice from that perspective isn't to fight the conspiracy directly.
Not necessarily in a worldly sense. The warning is more about not getting trapped or distracted by these worldly plots. Instead, the focus should be on personal faith, repentance, seeking God as the way to endure whatever comes. They see rising sin, lack of freedom, manipulation of truth as signs of the spiritual struggle, and the answer lies in turning towards God.
Okay, so after covering all these angles, the definition, the players, the methods, the impacts, the critiques, the spiritual takes, what's the big takeaway here?
I think what really stands out is that this idea, the New World Order, isn't just one single theory. It's more like a lens people use to filter all sorts of anxieties about power, about control, about how society is changing so fast. And as we've seen, how those anxieties get filtered can sometimes lead to some very real and sometimes very dangerous consequences in the world.
So whether you see it as a literal plot for a totalitarian world government, or maybe just the natural way global cooperation evolves, or even as part of a larger spiritual drama, the ongoing conversation about the New World Order really makes you think. It forces us to consider how we try to find understanding, seek control, and search for truth in what feels like an increasingly complex world. What will you choose to believe? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.